In a bustling cafe, you can overhear fragments of conversations about love, stories of heartbreak, whispers of new infatuations, confessions of loneliness. Society often depicts love as something you gain from another person, suggesting that wholeness arrives only when you find the missing piece. The cultural narrative saturates us with the idea that love is external, that it's a quest for a soulmate who will make you complete. Yet beneath that noise, there's a quieter truth shared by some of history's greatest thinkers and psychologists. True love begins within, in the silent, sometimes daunting embrace of solitude. Solitude in this context is not loneliness or social isolation. Instead, it is a purposeful retreat into self-awareness, an acceptance of one's own inner landscape, flaws and potential. When you can sit comfortably with yourself and process your own fears, anxieties and desires, you lay the foundation upon which genuine love relationships can be built. Carl Jung once spoke of the process of individuation, whereby the conscious and unconscious parts of the psyche integrate. This lifelong journey, done largely in moments of quiet reflection, leads to a more authentic encounter with others. Consider it an ironic twist. By being willing to be alone, we grow more capable of healthy connection. We love best not by losing ourselves in another person, but by bringing a solid sense of who we are into the relationship. Explores that paradox, weaving insights from Nietzsche, Jung, Rilke, Frankl, Gibran, Schopenhauer and de Botton, alongside modern psychology and relatable stories. Ultimately, we'll see that solitude is not the enemy of love, but its vital precondition, a place where illusions burn away, leaving space for something deeper and truer to emerge. We often conflate solitude with loneliness, picturing a figure isolated in a barren apartment, or an introspective soul gazing forlornly out a window. Society fears solitude. We equate it with social failure or psychological distress. Yet many writers and psychologists affirm that a certain measure of solitude is not only healthy but essential. In solitude, we meet ourselves. We observe our swirling thoughts without distraction, confront hidden insecurities, and gently probe the edges of our comfort zones. Why does this matter for love? Because if we fail to accept our own complexities, our capacities for joy, anger, fear, generosity, we carry these unresolved aspects into relationships. Instead of seeking a relationship partner as a companion in growth, we seek them as an emotional crutch. We might cling to them for validation, or blame them for our unhappiness. When two people each rely on the other to fill an unrecognized void, the relationship can become codependent, stifling the genuine love we crave. Alternatively, a person who has learned to be alone is more likely to enter a relationship from a position of wholeness. They don't demand someone else to fix them. They ask for companionship that complements the self-work already undertaken. Far from being an act of selfishness, spending time in solitude can be a gift to future and current partners, freeing them from the responsibility of propping up your sense of self-worth. This dynamic fosters healthier, freer relationships in which two autonomous individuals support each other's growth. Friedrich Nietzsche, in works such as Thus Spoke Zarathustra, championed the idea of the individual rising above herd mentality to become the Übermensch, an evolved being who defines their own values. While Nietzsche isn't typically cited as a love guru, his emphasis on the individual's journey away from societal norms resonates with the idea that love requires a strong sense of self. Nietzsche suggests that those who mindlessly follow the herd seldom tap into their unique capacities. Likewise, if love is just an escape from oneself, a grasping at external validation, it dilutes the potential depth of connection. By becoming who you are, to use a famous Nietzschean phrase, you cultivate the courage to confront solitude and the illusions it dissolves. In that sense, you become capable of loving another person not as a tool to quell existential anxiety, but as a voluntary sharing of your own wellspring of being. Arthur Schopenhauer is often viewed as a pessimist, especially regarding love and desire. However, in The Wisdom of a Life, he espouses reflections on how much of our dissatisfaction stems from misplaced will, our ceaseless longing for what we don't have. Schopenhauer's worldview suggests that untempered will leads us to chase illusions. One of these illusions is that another person can magically erase our inner void. Yet Schopenhauer also stresses introspection as a path to mitigating constant desire. By turning inward and acknowledging the ephemeral nature of our wants, we gain clarity. This introspection is a form of solitude, a break from the ceaseless pursuit of external objects, which can include romantic partners. Paradoxically, Schopenhauer's Stoic advice aligns with the concept that only when we stop trying to fill our emptiness with others can we genuinely relate to them, free from desperation. Rainer Maria Rilke offers a more tender take on solitude. In Letters to a Young Poet, Rilke famously encourages the young writer to embrace periods of aloneness, describing it as the wellspring of creativity and profound understanding. Rilke believed that the individual must cultivate an inner world so rich and self-sustaining that love becomes a sharing of gifts rather than a desperate search for completion. Rilke's poignant counsel suggests that solitude is not a withdrawal from love, but a foundation for a higher form of connection. When you have dwelled in your own heart, you won't treat another's heart as a mere refuge from your insecurities. Instead, you enter a relationship prepared to discover the other's inner cosmos, just as you have explored your own. The mutual exploration that follows can be exhilarating, rooted in respect, and unencumbered by the chains of neediness. Carl Jung's concept of individuation centers on integrating the conscious self with the unconscious, including archetypes like the shadow, anima, animus, and persona. This process is inherently solitary. One must confront personal dreams, fantasies, fears, and hidden potentials that can't be fully comprehended through another person's eyes. Love, in Jung's framework, becomes deeper and more stable when two individuated people come together. Instead of projecting their unconscious desires or fears onto each other, they relate from a place of awareness. Jungian analyst Robert A. Johnson called this the shift from romantic love, where we idealize the partner as our missing piece, to real love, where we see them as a flawed, wonderful human being, not an archetypal savior. This real love demands the courage to face solitude, so that unconscious projections fade and genuine intimacy can blossom. In Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor E. Frankl reflects on his experiences in a concentration camp, where external circumstances stripped away almost every comfort. Frankl's observations highlight that our deepest sense of purpose and dignity often emerges under extreme conditions of aloneness. He notes that even in such horrific isolation, individuals could cling to meaning through memories of loved ones, spiritual beliefs, or personal values. While this is a more radical example of solitude than most of us will face, Frankl's core insight, that meaning arises internally and can't always be provided by external factors, resonates with our discussion of a love. If you rely solely on a partner to supply your sense of worth, you risk an existential vacuum should that relationship falter. Instead, Frankl's perspective suggests that each of us is responsible for forging our own sense of meaning, which can then become the bedrock of a loving connection. From a more contemporary clinical viewpoint, attachment theory, pioneered by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, explores how early bonding experiences influence adult relationships. People with an insecure attachment style, anxious or avoidant, often struggle with extremes of clinging or distancing. Interestingly, the journey to a more secure attachment often involves healing personal wounds, an inner process reminiscent of solitude. By learning self-soothing techniques and establishing internal emotional security, individuals can approach relationships with less anxiety or fear of abandonment. They feel more comfortable giving and receiving love, and they know they can survive even if their partner isn't constantly available to them emotionally. In an era dominated by connectivity, the notion of enjoying solitude can seem countercultural. We're constantly nudged to join, share, and comment. Popular media portrays romance as the pinnacle of human experience, rarely focusing on the virtues of singlehood or introspection. If someone prefers to spend a weekend alone reading or taking nature walks, they might be labelled antisocial or weird. This cultural stigma can deter people from harnessing solitude's gifts. Yet, if love truly begins with solitude, such a stigma is a barrier to discovering deeper, more meaningful relationships. Many might rush into partnerships not because they've found someone compatible, but because they dread being alone. The relationship that follows can be fraught with tension, as the fear of returning to solitude overshadows genuine affection. Social media fosters the illusion that we're never alone. Constant notifications, digital chatter, and curated images of perfect couples or squad goals. Yet, Ironically, these platforms can feed dissatisfaction and fear of missing out, FOMO. When we see everyone else seemingly in blissful relationships, we might rush to fill any empty space in our own lives, avoiding solitude at all costs. But the curated online environment is not reality. Many relationships that look enviable on Instagram are riddled with the same insecurities and challenges as any other. By stepping back from the noise, perhaps through a deliberate social media detox, we can refocus on our authentic states of mind. In that quiet, we might rediscover the value of being alone, of coming face to face with the self beneath the digital persona. Khalil Gibran, in The Prophet, famously wrote about love and marriage. Let there be spaces in your togetherness. This poetic advice resonates perfectly with the theme that solitude enriches the capacity for love. Gibran suggests that a healthy relationship involves two distinct souls who remain individuals while choosing to walk side by side. The subtlety here is that the bond is voluntary, not born from fear or the inability to stand alone. Each partner, comfortable in their solitude, becomes a collaborative participant in love rather than an enmeshed or clingy half-person. Gibran's words reinforce that love is not about merging identities, but dancing in harmony, each person maintaining their own rhythm while creating something harmonious together. Alain de Botton, in The Course of Love, expands on the challenges of sustaining a long-term relationship. He observes that many couples enter romance under the sway of idealization, believing the other person to be perfect. Over time, the imperfections surface. De Botton argues that a more sustainable approach to love acknowledges that our partners are flawed and that we too are flawed. Hence the need for mutual acceptance, compassion, and patience. Where does solitude fit in? If you haven't spent time understanding your own flaws and emotional triggers, you'll likely project them onto your partner. Conversely, if you've done the solitary work of facing your own limitations, you can meet your partner's quirks or mistakes with empathy, not blame. De Botton's lens of mature romance aligns with the notion that love thrives when built upon a foundation of self-awareness, much of which is honed in solitude. Emotional maturity is the glue that holds a meaningful relationship together. It involves regulating your emotions without demanding constant validation, communicating needs clearly, and respecting the boundaries of the other person. Achieving this maturity often demands an ongoing dance between solitude and connection. Too much solitude and you risk becoming disconnected. Too little and you risk losing yourself. The sweet spot is where your I remains solid yet open to co-creating a we that doesn't obliterate individuality. This interplay echoes Jung's individuation process, Gibran's poetic pleas for spaces and togetherness, and de Botton's realism about love's trials. When both people in a relationship value solitude not as an enemy, but as a necessary haven, they foster an environment where personal growth blossoms. In turn, the relationship evolves rather than stagnates in codependency. Creating pockets of intentional solitude doesn't require a cabin in the woods or a Himalayan monastery. It can be as simple as taking a 10-minute walk alone each day, turning off the smartphone notifications for an hour, or dedicating weekends to reflective hobbies like painting or journaling. These mindful retreats help break the cycle of constant external input, letting your thoughts settle and your emotions breathe. A well-known tool in therapeutic and self-development circles, journaling offers a space to pour out your anxieties, aspirations, doubts, and revelations. In the quiet of writing, you can identify emotional patterns, limiting beliefs, or repetitive relationship dramas. By tracking how you feel over time, you observe triggers that push you to seek external reassurance versus moments when you feel secure in your own company. This data becomes a roadmap, guiding you toward what fosters genuine self-acceptance. Boundary setting is an act of self-love, and by extension, it supports healthy relationships. If you cannot articulate your personal limits, you risk resenting others for crossing lines they never knew existed. Solitude is critical for clarifying these boundaries because it is during alone time that you sense when you feel genuinely safe or overwhelmed in social dynamics. Some examples: emotional boundaries, deciding how much emotional labor you can handle before you need time to recharge. Time boundaries, scheduling nights off from social engagements, even if friends or partners protest. Digital boundaries, logging out of social media or messaging apps at certain hours to maintain mental clarity. When relationships are built around clear, lovingly communicated boundaries, they become healthier ecosystems where each person can thrive. Far from pushing loved ones away, boundaries often create the structure that fosters deeper intimacy. Consider a fictional, yet relatable story. Mia, a busy professional who spent her 20s rushing from one relationship to the next. She feared being alone, convinced her worth hinged on having a partner. Yet each relationship ended in heartbreak, often fueled by jealousy or neediness. One day, burnt out and single, Mia decided to take a year off dating. She delved into painting, started therapy, and took solo trips to art museums on weekends. At first, she felt raw and uncertain, battling waves of loneliness. Over time, she found a peaceful contentment in these solitary pursuits, realizing she could laugh, learn, and exist fully without a partner's constant presence. When she later met Alex, something shifted. She no longer asked Alex to validate her every move. Her newfound self-assurance freed Alex to share their own vulnerabilities without feeling pressured to be Mia's saviour. In this space of mutual independence, a robust love developed, one that allowed them to grow individually and collectively. Mia's story exemplifies that, by confronting the discomfort of solitude, we can uncover a reservoir of self-worth, which then makes love a choice rather than a compulsion. Embracing solitude doesn't mean forsaking community. Ironically, it can lead to more meaningful communal ties. In group settings, be it a creative collective, a spiritual retreat, or a local club, people who have cultivated comfort in their own skin often form deeper bonds. They're less likely to rely on group membership solely for external validation, and more inclined to bring unique perspectives to the collective. The love that emerges in these communities can be profound and multifaceted, a shared humanity that thrives on respectful individuality rather than uniform conformity. To say love begins in solitude might initially sound counterintuitive. How could an emotion so associated with togetherness and shared experience possibly start in isolation? Yet, the paradox dissolves when we realize that solitude doesn't equate to loneliness. Rather, solitude is the intentional act of being present with oneself, unraveling layers of social conditioning, calming the restless mind, acknowledging personal fears, and celebrating unique gifts. From Nietzsche's call to individual strength, to Jung's process of individuation, to Rilke's poetic command to go into yourself, countless thinkers have insisted that forging a meaningful inner life is not a retreat from love, but a prerequisite for it. When we know and accept the self we discover in solitude, we no longer look to romantic partners or friends to fill existential voids. Instead, we bring an already vibrant sense of being into the relationship, allowing love to flourish without the weight of unspoken neediness or projected fantasies. In modern times, the necessity of solitude seems drowned out by the incessant hum of online chatter and the cultural push toward instant gratification. But if you pay attention, you'll hear a gentle rhythm beneath the noise, a call toward a slower, quieter space within yourself. Answering that call can be uncomfortable at first, as you face unhealed wounds or unspoken truths. Yet the reward is a more grounded sense of self from which genuine love can grow. Love that doesn't smother or cling, but uplifts and expands both partners. So, set aside a few moments or hours for solitude. Write a journal entry, take a meditative walk, or simply sit in silence. In that protected sanctuary, observe your thoughts and emotions as they come and go. You may feel a surge of restlessness, a desire to pick up your phone or distract yourself. Resist gently but firmly, and watch how the restlessness eventually settles. Over time, you'll come to see that beneath all the surface chatter, there's a still core, a place of self-awareness and inner peace. From this quiet center, you're ready to receive another's love not as a crutch or an escape, but as a conscious, joyous offering. And that, in essence, is why love begins in solitude. It's only when we've learned to stand in our own light that we can freely share our warmth with another, without losing the glow that makes each of us uniquely alive.